Good afternoon. You all
Hello.
are brave folks coming in on a Friday afternoon to do a little bit of learning. Thanks for joining us. We're gonna give it a minute for folks to stream in. Um, it's right after lunch too, so I hope everybody brought their caffeine. Don't get too sleepy on me. All right, I'm seeing some familiar names. Good to see you all. You're welcome to put on your camera or not. It's up to you. So I want to just welcome you in. We are here today for an hour to talk about resources to support your tribe's adaptation planning. And this is brought to you by the Tribal Climate Health Project. I'll introduce myself here in just a minute. But part of this is to try to familiarize those of you who haven't yet met us about who we are and what we've been doing over the last 9 years. And part of this is to give a little more information to some of the direct tribes that we support in some of our programs that I know are working on climate resilience and are oftentimes these days in 2025 finding that work even more challenging maybe than it was before. And so we really felt like it was a good time to share with you some of the services and offerings that we have. If any of it could be making your work on the ground easier as you try to protect your tribes from the impacts of climate change, we'll be very happy about that. So all of our services are free of charge. And the other thing is we have a summit coming up. And those of you that are coming to our Tribal Climate Health Project Summit on November 4th, this is a little bit of a preview just so you know us a little bit better before you arrive. So really that was just me warming up and stalling some more folks could join, and they are. So let's get into it. Thanks again for coming. So today our job together in the next hour is just to share some relevant tools and resources to support your tribe's climate adaptation efforts. We're going to preview some of these tools, even something that's under development we're excited about around vulnerability data. And then we'll talk to you a little bit about some upcoming, not just trainings, but some of the upcoming work for Tribal Climate Health Project. As we go along, if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat and we'll kind of take them throughout. At the end, we have some discussion opportunities. So we'll be asking you some questions about what you saw. If you have questions for us about our services and interested in your thoughts about where else you need us to go. So after a little bit of an overview, we'll do a demo of some things and then dive into the tools. So that's the plan for the day. Let's go to the next slide. Who am I? I'm Angie Hacker. I play the role of a lead consultant for the Tribal Climate Health Project. I do that with a lot of folks. And so I want to introduce you to a couple other members of my team. So I'm with Prosper Sustainably, and I've got a couple of folks that also work with Prosper to help support the Tribal Climate Health Project. So I've got Serena Gayano and Lori Montserrat. They're here to help. And if you need something during this session, you can always reach out directly to them. And they are always working behind the scenes to help us help tribes. The other person I want to mention who is not here today, we wish she was, is Shasta Gon. A lot of you know her. She's the environmental director of the Palabana Mission Indians, who couldn't be here today, but is the leader here of the Tribal Climate Health Project and a really key champion for this work. I want to invite you to introduce yourself over chat. We'd love to get to know you better and get to know each other. So just tell us who you are and where you're hailing from today. All right, let's go to the next slide. So I want to tell you a little bit about the Tribal Climate Health Project. If you don't know us, as I mentioned, we are led by the Palabana Mission Indians. We got a start about 9 years ago when there was some original EPA dollars available that at that time, doing some of this work in climate adaptation, particularly with a health focus, was relatively uncommon with a lot of communities, including tribes. And so we were fortunate to receive some grant dollars from them, and then more recently through BIA and NIHB and even California Energy Commission to continue this work. And our job is to develop learning resources to help tribes and tribal serving professionals safeguard their communities from the health impacts of climate change. So we consider ourselves capacity building and really think of ourselves as like from the outside, how can we make that work easier for you? Because we know how constrained and limited your time and capacity can be. Not capabilities, but just time. And so if we can help from the outside, we would really like to make that work easier. So Shasta's with the Paula Environmental Department. I'm with Prosper Sustainably. We're sort of partners in this effort. And a lot of what we did in the beginning was training, but it really became clear early on that training wasn't enough to really build capacity and the kinds of support that tribes really needed to do what can be sometimes very difficult work in trying to understand and act on the risks associated with climate change on health and other impacts. So we're going to share with you some, like the suite of things we have built to try to respond here and help. You can join us, actually. Maybe somebody can drop the link in for the Tribal Climate Health Project's website, and you can peruse around on your own. I'm going to give you just some snapshots of some of the services that we offer. And so, there's a lot of information here about our trainings. We've done, I think the last slide said like 94 trainings. I don't even know. It's all a blur. It's been 9 good years of trying to provide capacity, but not all of that's just direct training and somebody talking at you. A lot of that in the more recent years has become more about pure knowledge exchange, and we've been really happy to have the participation of tribes teaching each other about what's working in their communities. I'm going to share next this EISI adaptation tool and tell you what that's all about. We also have a resource clearinghouse of hundreds of different resources that are available that we know of that are there to help support this work that you might take advantage of. I'm going to walk through after the demo of a tool, a lot of templates and report templates, survey templates, technical assistance directory, a lot of other stuff that we offer. So we'll get to that. We've also published a few items, a few publications that we think are of interest. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that, and I will do a little walkthrough though of this My Adaptation Pathway feature, which is us trying to take all this training material and put it into a sequential learning opportunity. So like a curriculum that you can walk through at a self-paced way and dive into different content. So all that's in store. Let's go to the next slide. All right. One of the things we wanted to share with you, and I know if you're here with we provide technical assistance. I do for the Tribal Capacity Building Program, a program of the Strategic Growth Council. If you're here from that program, I've been starting to preview with you that we have this tool if you are doing, maybe at the beginning of a climate vulnerability assessment. Part of what we learned, and you can go to the next slide, is that the work of doing a vulnerability assessment can be an extreme fact-finding mission. And if you're somebody with limited time or resources, that could be really overwhelming. And so in the process of doing these kinds of vulnerability assessments with tribes, we began collecting what we knew of as the best data sets, data sources, information sources, like what was meaningful for tribes in trying to figure out where the risks really lie. And so it ends up being that the information is in a million different places. So we wanted to create an inventory of those that made it easier for you guys to have a place to start. And so it's called the Exposures, Impacts, and Strategies Inventory. We call it EISI. Is it as easy as we want? No, but it's getting there. It's a customized tool. It's in Excel. I'm going to show it to you. It's free. You could download it right now on our website, and somebody will drop in the link. It'll take a minute because it's kind of big. And if you don't like Excel, you might be afraid, but I have good news because we're turning it into a web-based platform with our friends that are going to speak here in a little while. I'm going to show you the web-based tool. It was updated fairly recently, and then we'll show you where we're headed with a web-based tool with Public Health Alliance. All right, so I am going to actually take the reins now here on the screen and show you just a little demo of what the EISI tool looks like. As I'm pulling this up, just a reminder, you can please drop questions in the chat and some of the team will prompt me if I need to stop and clarify anything. We want this to be interactive and useful. So let me increase the size here just a little bit. Okay, so this is the instruction page. Like I said, this is an Excel tool. It's broken up into tabs. The tabs are all designed to walk you through a process of actually conducting a vulnerability assessment. And if you've done that, you know that there's a lot of different information that goes into it. It's sort of a formula. How severe and likely are the climate exposures coming to my community? And so in the Tribal Climate Health Project, we created this framework, which is how we think of the vulnerabilities. So we know that there are certain drivers of climate change, and those have expressed themselves in community with different exposures, which maybe you think of them as hazards. They're called different things by different people. The primary exposures we tend to think about are temperature extremes, wildfires, storms and flooding, drought, melting ice, and sea level rise. This categorization has sort of stood the test of time and working with a lot of tribal communities across the country, especially here in California. Those are what we consider our primary exposures. That's when a climate condition sort of hits a community. Sometimes those have cascading effects, including to secondary exposures, and that often looks like worsened air quality, right? So you might see higher temperatures equating to higher ozone levels, or higher temperatures might equate to harmful algal blooms or more contamination in the water systems, and certainly drought is going to contribute to lower water supply and water availability. Drought's going to contribute to issues with food insecurity. Wildfire even has an effect on vector breeding and changes. So secondary effects cross air quality vectors, water insecurity, and food insecurity. And these are the things that the tribes we've worked with have told us are really affecting them. So these are the exposures, things you don't necessarily have control over, the climate conditions, but you can protect your community from in some way. So that's the whole goal, right? Around a lot of this adaptation work is how can we better get ahead of the impacts that we know are coming on our community with some strategies and some work. So those things all relate to impacts. We categorize impacts, meaning when it hits your community, it's going to make an effect to something that you care about, your natural environment, your built environment, your health and social environment. We spend a lot of time on health. We talk about human health from a physical and mental health perspective, but we also talk about cultural and spiritual health, socioeconomic health. And we know that all of these things are interconnected because we see them in your communities with you, that there's a close relationship between the impacts on the relatives in the natural environment and your spiritual and cultural well-being. So, but that's how we've categorized it. I'm telling you this now because it factors into how this tool is also developed. And then at the end of the day, this is where the strategies, this is where you can act, right? The good news is there's a lot you can do to minimize the actual consequences to your communities if we know what's coming. And so a lot of this is just about eyes wide open. Let's make sure we are not blind to these possible impacts that are coming our way with climate change now and in the future, and get ahead of trying to protect those communities with strategies. So we'll start first with exposures, and I'm sorry that this is a lot of small text, but I'm just going to kind of run you through so you get a general idea of what this thing does. Imagine starting from scratch. What are my vulnerabilities? Well, at least you can start here where we've listed out these exposures and any possible secondary exposures. All this comes from sort of credible research about the relationships. And we're talking about which regions really are a risk here. And what part of what we do here is share with you exposure indicators, meaning how would you measure the effect here? So here, if we're talking about storms and flooding, how would you measure that exposure in terms of how severe and likely it is going to be that is going to be something that your community should consider a vulnerability and act to address? So that might look like changes in precipitation, or maybe it's changes in days with extreme precipitation. We have a lot of different metric or indicators here, right? Which is just, these are the ways that you can think about measuring the impact on your community. And there's, along with that, are data sources. So instead of just leaving you in the abyss to say, here, go find something that you could possibly use to understand how how likely the flood risk level is. Well, we can instead point you to a data source if we know of it. And so this ends up being an inventory of data sources that are publicly accessible. These are sort of a collection of our favorites, something if I was doing a vulnerability assessment, I would go to these in order to try to find whatever information was publicly available. And what you'll find in here too is that sometimes we just point you to information that if you have it in-house, we encourage you to use it. We know your information is often the best, and that might come from tribal ecological knowledge or community members' observations or your own studies or records that you have in-house. And if you have, so always if you have something better, use it. And these are sort of as a default, this is what's available publicly. The way you can use this is as a worksheet to put in if you find information that's historical, meaning more in the past, baseline meaning current, or projected, which really is helpful but is often unavailable, meaning like, all right, what do we know about how bad the flooding has gotten in the last 50 years? What's that trend line look like? And what do we know about projected information? So how bad is it going to get in the next 20 to 50 years so that you can properly plan? At the end here is an exposure risk level. So in this case, for say storms and flooding, you would have the opportunity to actually make a determination based on all the information that you might have scoured. Is this a low, no, not a priority, or a low, medium, or high priority? And that helps factor into your overall vulnerability assessment. So once you understand the exposure level by reviewing some data, reviewing it, the findings specifically, we try to get it down as specifically locational as we can, meaning like if it's maybe we get down to the county level, maybe we get down to a census tract. Rarely we get down to a tribal boundary, but we like that when it happens. But down as location specific as we can, we're doing our best to understand how severe and likely those risks are coming to you. Once you understand your risk level, then you move over to impacts. And this is something we do that not a lot of other tools, I think, do, but recognizing that the exposures actually relate to specific risks. So let me try to find a good one here. All right, so here's one. We don't always have data for it, but severe storms and flooding we know will create a a cultural and spiritual effect on disruption of traditional fishing and sustenance practices. And so one thing you might look at is, production rates of specific species. We don't have a good data set for that, but other things we do. So we know that storms and flooding also could have an impact on health in that it will increase the demand and potential disruption to healthcare services, including power, like through power outages or communications or transportation. So we try to find some indicators and some data sources for that kind of thing. In some cases, these are good suggestions for the kinds of information you might want to look at if we don't have the best data set. It's a starting point. Once it's the same system here, you could have historical baseline and projected information. Basically find the most location specific and detailed information that you can, and hopefully you have a whole trend line that takes you back 50 years and forward 50 years. That doesn't always exist. We do our best. In here too, so there's more information that I'm not going to go into too much detail on, but there's a whole other tab here. You could also evaluate what we consider your population sensitivity and adaptive capacity, which are factors that moderate your risk level up or down. And so these are the kinds of indicators we look for there, meaning like if you know that severe extreme heat is coming your way and you also have a high urban heat island index in your community, for some reason, maybe you've got a lot of pavement or something, that would increase your risk. So whatever risk level you end up with here, you would modulate it up because we know that your urban heat island effect in combination with more extreme heat is going to be problematic for your community. But say you have a really high level of air conditioning, well, that might moderate your vulnerability level down a little because you have some protection in place, some adaptive capacity. It's just an example. And so at the end of the day, same thing, you have an opportunity to actually assess the risk, the vulnerability level here. So based on all the information you know so far, say, for example, how bad is the risk of, let's look at, Okay, storms and flooding is associated with mental health consequences. You could look at a variety of data sources. Here, we're actually pointing you to the Tribal Epidemiology Center that has some really good data on mental health. You can decide whether or not you think that's not a risk at all and not a vulnerability, or is it a low, medium, or high. So it's kind of a worksheet alongside a way to access whatever data we think is possibly meaningful here. The end of this, once you have your vulnerability levels, you kind of, the idea is you want to identify the things that are most, the highest vulnerabilities for you, like the most significant vulnerabilities, because you're limited on time and resources. And then we try to determine if we know maybe there's top 20 vulnerabilities across all of these impacts. Those are the ones we try to solve for, right? So then the point of the game here with adaptation planning is to try to come up with strategies that are going to have the most bang for the buck to get you into a place where your community is better prepared when the impacts come. And so this is just a strategies tab, which is an attempt to have a filterable database of all sorts of different strategies that we have seen both in tribal communities and non-tribal communities. We've been collecting, all of this is really just a big hoarding exercise over the years. We have been collecting and collecting strategies. It's just a place to begin rather than just, you could brainstorm. We often like to, to hear from obviously the tribe itself about what it wants to do, what it can do, what it's already done. But here's some ideas for other things that might help support you in dealing with any of these impacts or exposures. It also is a tool that will help you do a little bit of planning. So you have the opportunity further down here to actually do some assessment on those strategies. So you could kind of rank its need and feasibility and do some plotting in terms of time frame and how it might actually be implemented, meaning in responsible departments and resources and things. So the intention here is to end up, this is a decision companion tool that we hope helps you end up with a good, well-informed view of your vulnerabilities and and a plan, an implementable plan for the most useful strategies that you can then take action on. That's what I wanted to show you. Were there any questions popping up in the chat? Or does anybody find that a complete blur? I hope you have found where you can download it. We are around. Lori, what else do you want to add here? I want to add that Lori is around. She is a great resource and would be able to help walk anybody through how to use this tool in more detail.
I have to admit, the first time I opened the EISI tool, I opened it and then immediately got out of Excel because it was so overwhelming to my brain. But I've gotten used to it over time. And if anybody wants help walking through or how do you fill it out, and you don't want to sit through the YouTube tutorial, you can sit through me instead. I'm happy to help you with what you need for your tribe.
So again, if you're feeling overwhelmed and you're working on a vulnerability assessment or an adaptation plan, if this is useful, please use it. We would be very happy. And then reach out for more help if we can provide it. Serena, would you mind sharing your screen again and we'll continue along. I am going to peek at the chat real quick here just to see if there's anything to address. No, but I am glad to see some nice comments and some introductions. It's so nice to be here with you all. Okay, so I am really excited to welcome up Colleen from the Public Health Institute, who has been a really fantastic partner on our CEC Tribal Research Grant, and we know how this Excel tool feels. It feels hard. We're trying to turn it into a web-based platform that is easier to interact with, and so Colleen's going to share a little bit about where we're at with that.
Yeah, is it all right if I share my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Get into it. Let's see. All right, yeah. So like Angie mentioned, my name's Colleen Bodenreiter. I'm the climate change and health data lead at the Public Health Alliance of Southern California. And I'll be giving an overview of I don't know if we can call it a spin-off version, but a version of the EISI tool that we've been working on with Paula Band of Mission Indians and Prosper Sustainably. So The tool is still in development, but we're looking to make it available sometime in the spring of next year. All right. So what is it exactly? It's essentially a pilot project that, like Angie mentioned, translates the framework and the data in the original EISI spreadsheet tool into an online interactive guided tool that's designed to help tribe understand the impacts of extreme heat on communities, places, and ecosystems. And it guides tribes through a 5-step process that might look a little bit familiar because it's based on the EISI tool that you just saw. But essentially, first, you select or define a tribal area. Second, you'll look at projected extreme heat data for your tribal area and assess the risk of extreme heat based on the data that you see. Then you'll look at data on secondary exposures and assess the risk that those secondary exposures pose to your tribal area. Then you'll identify and rank different threatened community assets. So those could be resources or values that are important for your community to protect. And then finally, you'll assess data on various extreme heat impacts to human health, taking into consideration how they impact community assets, and then different factors that influence your community sensitivity and resilience to extreme heat. And then after you go through all these 5 steps, the tool will automatically generate a profile featuring the data that you selected, the assets that you highlighted, and a selection of adaptation strategies that you can use to improve your community's resilience to extreme heat. So I wanted to give kind of an overview of the key differences between the two tools, because they are very similar, but they also are quite different. So again, they share a similar approach, but the new EISI for Extreme Heat tool is not just a static spreadsheet. So it's an interactive web-based tool that really guides you through. The second difference is that while the EISI spreadsheet focuses on multiple climate exposures, like flooding and other things, the EISI for Extreme Heat web tool is just focused on extreme heat. And it doesn't contain data for other climate exposures. And that's why we're calling it a pilot project. The ultimate goal is to add and expand different climate exposures, but for right now, we're just starting with extreme heat. Another difference is that is with the data. So the original EISI spreadsheet, again, provides links to different data sources that then you have to click on and comb through and manually enter into the spreadsheet. But with the EISI for Extreme Heat tool, one of the big positives is that you can access and visualize the data for extreme heat impacts and exposures and vulnerability indicators directly within the tool. So you don't have to go to different data sources and comb through them. All the data, or a lot of the data, is available in one place. And then another thing that I wanted to note quickly is that the EISI spreadsheet, I think, has an option for nationwide data sources, but the EISI for Extreme Heat tool is limited to California in geography. So I'll just quickly go through what the tool looks like. I know it can seem kind of abstract when I just talk through it as an overview. So the first step, like I mentioned before, is selecting a tribal area, and you can actually do that in 2 ways. You can search for a list of tribal areas that'll kind of pre-populate areas based on reservation boundaries and how they intersect with census tracts. Or if you want to include different areas, or for example, that include like ancestral lands, you can add those and individually, like manually add tracks by clicking on them. And then after you select an area, you can view extreme heat exposure data for that area. So in this case, there's a lot more data than this, but for just the screenshot, you can see the average annual number of days above 90 degrees and 100 degrees Fahrenheit that you can expect to see during the middle and end of the century. And then based on the extreme heat data that you're looking at, we want you to use this, this slider to rank the risk of extreme heat exposure in your tribal area. So the second step is to review the data and rank secondary exposures. So these are, again, exposures that are triggered by extreme heat and might also result in impacts to communities. So here with air quality, water contamination. And then for each secondary exposure, we want you to review the data available. So we have air quality data available for ozone, PM 2.5, and diesel particulate matter. And we want you to rank the risk that it poses to your community based on that data. So the fourth step is ranking community assets and resources that are important for your community to protect in the face of extreme heat. And one key thing that we recommend that tribes do here is do community engagement on those community assets and use the results of that community engagement to inform your rankings here. So that it's reflective of the whole community. And to help tribes with that, we've provided a link to a template survey that Prosper Sustainably put together and might even go over soon. And then finally, it all kind of culminates in assessing the impacts that extreme heat might have on your community, including physical health impacts, mental health impacts, and respiratory impacts. And so for each impact type, you can view the first tab is looking at the important community assets that relate to that impact. Then you can view impact indicators. So indicators that directly measure the impact. So heat-related stress and illness. You can see hospitalizations due to heat. And then you can look at impact modifiers, which are data on community conditions that can impact your community sensitivity or adaptability to extreme heat. And we recognize that there are many, many more impacts beyond just human health impacts, including environmental and cultural impacts. And we're working on ways for tribes to include that securely in a report feature that we're looking to add to this tool. And the final, it culminates in this final community profile where it spits out a few adaptation strategies that you can consider based on the risks that you provided, as well as other strategies. And then, you'll notice that for most of these indicators, we have add to community profile kind of button, and that will add that indicator that you want to see in that data at the bottom of this community profile. So you can have all the data that you're interested in one place. And that's about it. Thank you so much for letting me demonstrate. And if you have any feedback or comments, I'll drop my email in the chat. And feel free to send me an email. I'm also happy to answer any questions if there's time for that.
Thanks, Colleen. Oh, you're getting some claps. I think people feel we did this on purpose. Scare you with a horrible Excel document and then reassure you with a lovely looking web platform. Hopefully you are as hopeful as we are. Let me clarify. So we're very thankful for Public Health Alliance's help here. This tool is something that we'll be able to make live, but it's just extreme heat for now. So the EISI tool is, while not as user-friendly, is more comprehensive at this point with more data sets across more areas. But there's a question here for us, Colleen. Somebody's Steph is asking, you mentioned the web tool will be expanded to more exposures. Will y'all also be able to expand the geographic coverage? Is there any expected timeline on that? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think expanding geography might be a little bit more challenging, but it's something, hey, if we have the funding for it, we can do it. So yeah, that's definitely a good idea. And I know tribes outside of California would definitely benefit from a tool like this.
There's also a question as to open source program.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the tool right now is not open source, but we can consider, I can bring that up to our developer and can I consider if that makes sense to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of the sources we're basically scraping off of other sources that exist, and because they're open source, and I think we'll be ending up pointing back to those sources as well, and so accessible maybe indirectly. But yeah, okay, that's something for us to think about. Thank you for those questions. I'm gonna anybody else want to raise your hand or unmute and ask anything here? I think most people probably need to get in there, tinker around, play with it, and then say help when they need it. Let's see, did anybody see hands up? Oh, Donna, welcome. Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, let's see, turn on my video here. I'm calling in from West Sacramento. I don't know if you can see me or not. I have so much stuff going on in here. Anyway,
Sure.
I'm calling in from West Sacramento. I'm Tungwang Naung, Donna Miranda Begay, Tabata Level T, Navajo Key, Tule River Yokut, and Dene. So I just wanted to mention that I am within the Kern Valley area, and I'm Tabatalabo, and I hope everybody's having a great day. I've worked for Cal EPA for probably over 10 years, and I worked in the Water Board as well as on the Tribal Advisory Council. I have worked in the past with Department of Water Resources, also under Natural Resources Agency. And I remember 2014, and as recent as 2022, there was a climate change risk assessment matrix created by them, and it had the potential impact and also strategies. And I could share the link with you in the chat as soon as I get done talking, because I can't chew gum and walk at the same time. But anyway, I think the efforts, what you're doing is very good. I do know that Cal EPA has an environmental screen website as well that provides, the perspective, and again, California focused. But yeah, I think this is all great to have. Any kind of tools are out there. And I'm also on the writing team for the fifth assessment of climate change with the governor's office in California, the Land Use and Climate Innovation Group. So yeah, so I'm just taking it all in, and I'll be at Paula early November. So looking forward to seeing you guys and meeting all the other folks. And my organization is California Tribal GIS, and I help train California Native American tribes, both federally and non-federally recognized, in the use of GIS from intro to networking them to the right resources. Yeah.
Donna, I'm so glad we're going to see you in November. I think you might need to be our new best friend. A knowledgeable person out there. And yeah, thank you. Well, you're feeding my hoarding problem, but we are always looking for other good resources that we can incorporate into these things. We know that there's so many good data sets out there. So yeah, and if anybody is welcome to please send us, if you have a favorite tool or information source, we would love to hear it. Thank you, Donna. Okay, there was one more question about who's the intended audience, and that is, you're right. It's mainly we're thinking about who would write your climate vulnerability assessment or adaptation plan, and often that's an in-house person in your environmental department. Might be an emergency manager, might be somebody that's in the tribal administration office. Yes, all of those, and ideally making it so that when you do hire out a consultant, if you do that, you maybe this work is even easier for them to complete. Okay, well, let's move on to our next. I want to do a quick run through of some of our other tools before we open up to more discussion. But please continue dropping either information sources or questions in the chat. Some other things we're doing to try to help, right? We said trainings aren't enough, so we dove deep into data. We thought if we can help make this data easier to access, we will have done something good. And now that Colleen's making it into a beautiful web page, I will my work here is done. No, we will feel like we've made some progress there, but there's some other things. One thing we have made available are adaptation plan templates. So when we first wrote Paula's vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan, we decided to make it publicly accessible. It's a little outdated now, but the structure of it is still pretty good, and I've used it over and over again in working with tribes, and I think some tribes have just downloaded it and used it. So you can go to this web page, you can easily download the report. It's in Word, which just means get in there, use what you like, remove what you don't like, edit it however you want. There's a lot of good content in there that is potential boilerplate, or you can just look at the sources and go back and update it. We just wanted to make it available so in case it helps. And so you could even just use it for inspiration about the kinds of things that go into an vulnerability assessment or adaptation plan. The nice thing about these is that it ties into the EISI tool. You can see like the framework, the framing of it is sort of similar. So we look at exposures and impacts in the same way. Okay, along with that, and I think Colleen mentioned it, one thing that I usually do in a vulnerability assessment, and you probably do too, is to engage the community. And oftentimes that's, you want to do that really thoughtfully and deliberately and in person and as extensively as you can, because you really want to make sure that your vulnerability assessment represents your community's, what it cares about, what it's concerned about, what it wants to do most. This is just one template that I use in the beginning of the process to try to gather some perspectives from a community. So it's the Climate Vulnerability Experiences and Priorities Survey. It's just a good, easy, early step to try to get some initial information from a community. You can download this as well. It's just a Google form template, and it's free, right? So free is good. You can even, again, use it as inspiration, make it your own. I will make you a customizable copy and you just do whatever you like with it, and I won't have access to that copy. So that's another piece. And so that would flow into the results of that. If you do download the report, you'll see where that fits. It's asking questions even like, what are your most important assets? And that we think factors really importantly into a vulnerability assessment, meaning maybe your community values its economic development the most, or maybe it's its water resources or its wildlife. You want to modulate your vulnerability assessment based on what your tribe really wants to protect the most. So those kinds of questions end up in this survey as well. Okay. Donna, yes, all this will be available. So you'll get the slides and the recording afterwards. So you don't stress about taking notes. More on adaptation plan templates. This is something we made available too. We had a Caltrans grant a few years ago, and we had done vulnerability assessment and adaptation plans for transportation specifically for 2 tribes. And so we made some of that information available. So the tribes were the Palaban and Mission Indians and Humboldt Indian Village of California. And I see Cindy here. Nice to see you. Paula made, we have this, like a 1-pager case study available, but Paula also allowed us to make their plans available as well. So same thing, you can take a look at what a transportation-focused adaptation plan would look like, and you could use a template there as well. The one thing I want to mention here is this is relevant because there's a funding opportunity. The same fund, the same grant is available now. It's due November 21st through Caltrans, so I have linked to it here. That's the Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant. So if you want, say you flooding and fire and heat and all these things are actually affecting your transportation infrastructure or creating transportation and mobility risks for your community, or say climate change is making it more obvious that folks have the potential to get trapped because you don't have enough ingress egress. It's a good grant to look at your roads, transportation infrastructure, and the implications on your community's well-being. Okay, next slide. Lori, I'm going to ask for your help maybe with this one. So I mentioned we have a lot of trainings. We've done a lot. We've packaged it now into a sequential self-paced course that you can access on our website. And right now there are 4 courses available where you can walk through at your own, your own pace to try. And it's all around how to get from initial vulnerability assessment through to an adaptation plan and into implementation. And so the first is just kind of general information, how tribes are affected by climate change. And then we go into the assessment process. Then we go into the adaptation planning processes where you decide what strategies you'll use to address your vulnerabilities. And then transitioning to action. So how do you implement and track those strategies? So, Lori, what do I want to say? What else do we want to say here on this one?
This is a nice little course for somebody that you want to know more, but you don't really want the whole to be required to go to a 3-day seminar, and you just need a little prompt to get going. It's also good for tribes that aren't in California because this will give you the process for going through an adaptation plan, and places to look. There's 2 links to the EISI tool, which has national data sources, and it's self-paced. So you can do as much or as little of this as you want, and it's fine. You can also skip. You're like, I already know this part. I want to plan strategies. Go straight to course 3. You're not locked in any point. And so it's really great that way. And it just steps you through.
So we continue to add to this as we have more content that comes out of our training. So, but you're free, it's free to you, and we welcome you to it. Next page, next slide, please. We also have this. This is I should have changed the title of this one, but this is our directory of tribal climate health adaptation assistance providers. So sort of like a TA directory. And I have to tell you, it's a little outdated because it's hard to keep it this year with the organizations that are or are not still functioning. But what we're looking to do is update it, and we were basically here asking for your help. If you are somebody who knows of or is providing pro bono, no cost assistance for tribes to do climate adaptation work, we want to help point people to you. And so you can email us. Maybe somebody can drop that email address here if you are, if you'd like to share some information with us about who we should add to this directory, or just use it. Okay. Next slide. The last thing I want to share with you is some upcoming meetings and events and some next steps for Tribal Climate Health Project. Do be adding any questions in the chat so we can get to those in just a moment. Next slide. Okay, some of you might already be registered for this. It's the Tribal Energy and Climate Collaborative Exchange. We call it TechX. We've been doing it for a while. It's something we re-upped recently. It happens every 2 months on the 4th Tuesday. It's an hour-long meeting where we are running through opportunities here in California that can help you advance your climate and energy work. And so it's directed specifically to folks like you, tribal serving practitioners working with tribal communities. Our next meeting is going to be October 28th from 10 to 11 Pacific. We always have a kind of a topic. We run through funding and assistance and capacity building opportunities, but this meat of the conversation will be on tribal climate adaptation through infrastructure. Part of what we try to do there is to illuminate some pathways to move this adaptation work forward, maybe in ways that are more institutionalized and possibly less hard hit in these difficult times. So we'll be talking about energy and energy resilience and how the effects of climate change affect energy and what you might do about it. That'll be our next topic, but we meet every 2 months. So if you sign up for the series, you'll be on board with us. We're going to have a couple speakers from the California Energy Commission and Strategic Growth Council. They're pretty good. It's just a good one to sign up for so you kind of stay in the know about opportunities in California. All right, next slide.
Angie, there is a quick question from Donna on TechX in the chat.
Oh, is Lawrence Livermore National Labs part of this series? Not yet. Should they be? Donna, we have to chat. You got a lot of, you got good ideas. But no, not that I don't think we've had them involved yet.
I can forward you their contact for the tribal affairs group out of Lawrence Livermore National Labs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. We just see this as a good vehicle for communication across California tribes, and oftentimes get a lot of agency folks or other service providers coming in and tell us how we can make this work easier. Okay, next slide. Well, and somebody's asking, will the series cover other regions or just California? That series, sometimes you get funding for a specific region. That one's specifically for California right now. We don't police it. You can come in and hear. Sometimes we talk about things of national significance, but we are tailored to a California audience for that one. This one is a national group. So because we're so focused on making the information and fact finding easier, we created a National Tribal Data Resilience Working Group. It's a series of meetings. We're mainly here talking to the wonks, the people that really want to help us make data more accessible so tribes can have an easier time identifying their blind spots and making good vulnerability decisions and adaptation decisions. But if you're interested in this, if you're somebody who really likes to think about the data, Donna, I'm looking at you. You might like to join this group where we get together every other month on the third Wednesday and dive into various data sets and talk through how to make them more accessible to tribes and try to share some knowledge with each other. Next slide. Man, this is a lot. Sorry that we're rolling through so many things, but I just want to give you a sampler platter. Some of you might be coming to our summit. It was mentioned already today. So we have our Tribal Climate and Health Adaptation Summit. We've been doing this annually. It'll be on November 4th at the Paula Resort. This one's going to be on the topic of the realities of tribal climate disaster resilience. So we've been through our past summits have talked about vulnerability assessments and adaptation plans and then transitioning to action. Now we're really looking at, all right, we planned for it and now it's hit. Wildfire, flood, heat disasters. How are tribes coping with it? What are some good strategies? What lessons can we learn from each other? If you haven't already registered, you still can. It's an in-person event and it's free. Okay, next slide. This is our agenda for that event, and you can learn more on the website too. But I'm getting very excited because we've got some good speakers lined up, and we hope you'll join us. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. This is just one last bit on what we're doing next. So we mentioned the EISI for Extreme Heat tool. So we already talked about that. We will keep this group and all of our listserv posted on when that goes live. We've been appreciating some input we've been receiving to make it as good as we can get it. We are also have this new focus on with one of our grants on trying to illuminate the status and gaps in certain data sets that we find are maybe more problematic to access for tribes than we would like. So around wildfire data and water supply in particular, we find these two things, information that's difficult to access. So we're going to do an analysis of where those data sets live, the status of them in terms of how accessible they are to tribes, how meaningful they are for a vulnerability assessment, and really create a white paper illuminating for folks where the best data sets are and where the gaps are so that this data providers like state agencies and others could potentially, we want to inform them on future work about how they might be able to close some of these blind spots for us so we better understand the risks around wildfire and health and water supply. We also have actually, if any of our tribal advisors are here, they should give a wave or something. We so appreciate you. There's 10 of them across the state. We compensate them to help us evaluate climate adaptation tools and give us feedback and ideas on our work. We are going to actually be recruiting for a next 2-year cycle of tribal advisors. If that's something you'd be interested in, we will be opening a solicitation or an application for tribal advisors in the next coming months. It's a good group and we would love to see you. Last thing is those tribal advisors are actually going to be part of what they get for their time is some pro bono work. So we have a grant that's allowing us to update Paula's vulnerability assessment because it's about time to do it. So it gives us a chance to experiment with not just the first vulnerability assessment, but how do you actually write a subsequent vulnerability? So how do you update a vulnerability assessment rather than starting from scratch? And then we will take that same process, writing summary analysis for several other tribes. So if you're a tribal advisor, you would get access to our work of developing a tribal vulnerability, a summary analysis with a lot of the kinds of data we've been talking about today, just making it easier to collect. Okay, that's what I wanted to share with you about what we're up to next. But here's some prompts for you in our last few minutes. If you have any feedback for us on anything, which tools from today are you excited to dig into? What resources or tools does your tribe need in the current environment? Meaning, like, what else should we be doing? And how can we continue to support each other in this work? Anybody who would like to share or just ask a question? We got a few minutes left. I'm looking in the chat here. Donna, why don't you want to unmute and share some of this stuff out loud?
Oh, yeah, hi. Yeah, I just kind of been working on data sovereignty, you know, when it comes to mapping and what's considered okay to map, but also just looking at what other states and tribes are doing in regards to this, and also at a global perspective of this. So the indigenous views of data sovereignty, and for me, I live on a tribal allotment land, and I would love to see my little square of 160 acres be on a fire map or be on a flood map or the Cal EPA environmental screen map. It's not on that map. So my legacy will be that any risk, like environmental risk mapping system, would have allotment lands on there, and then that'll be my legacy, and I'll be done. But right now I keep fighting the battle, and it's really easy because the Bureau of Indian Affairs has the data, at least I know for sure in California, and it's a simple click on a box for that particular layer to show up on the map. And I don't know for the life of me why people that create the maps for the public view do not have that. And so often I have to work with U.S. Forest Service or Bureau of Land Management or CAL FIRE to say, click on the darn box because it's there. And that way we show up whenever we see which directions the winds are blowing around a fire. You know, that way we know their direction and the alert systems, and being able to notify those tribal communities that live on those allotment lands.
Yeah, you're our new friend. So I would really love if you come to the National Tribal Resilience Data Work Group. We're going to send you an invite. I think you would just be fantastic. We do talk about data sovereignty there. We don't consider ourselves the expert in it, but it's obviously a factor. And we would love to have your perspective.
And vice versa, I'd love for you guys to participate in, and anybody on this call that has any interest in California Native American Tribal GIS. We're having a summit. This will be our second one. We had a really good one this year, but we're going to have it at University of Redlands on May 21st, 22nd, and we're now just starting the planning process. We know location, we know a couple of sponsors, and the software company, it's proprietary. It's a ESRI GIS software company. That's their headquarter town, actually, Redlands. And so they'll be joining us as well, and probably providing some free workshops on utilizing their data. But I also train folks too, the tribal folks, on the open source QGIS. So we try to balance both things because not all tribes are federally recognized, and they may need some help with the free access to GIS mapping software. So there's my plug. All right.
Thank
Donna,
you.
as
Yeah.
that summit gets further together, would love more information, and it sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we're happy to distribute it too through our listservs and things.
Okay,
So
great.
that sounds like
Yeah.
something great.
Yeah, we'll
Great
stay in
resource.
contact. Thank you.
Sounds good. I didn't see any other hands go up or items in the chat, but you all know where to find us. And we really appreciate everybody's time here today. Is there a last slide we should go to just to say our appreciations? Yes. Okay. Thank you for your time today. This recording and the materials will be shared with you after. You are welcome to reach back out anytime and participate in all of this, or just ask us questions or share your ideas. How can we be of help? We've been very honored to continue to work with tribes here on this program. So have a great rest of your day, and we will see you.